afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Part B for Thursday, June 10th. And we have got an amazing panel here for Lighting the Candle, a World That Works. And I just want to give you a caveat before we get started here. We don't have any dog in this fight about who's right and who's wrong, on the public stage and Twitter and all the rest of that. We just think it's kind of interesting what happens with a story about so many different things at so many different times, and where something that is completely innocuous and means no one any harm gets turned into a whole bunch of, headlines. So why are we here? We're here to empower you, the listener, and we're going to invite you to ask questions. When somebody tells you that Elmo was racist, or that Dr. Seuss was racist, or something else that like, and trust from your childhood that was so important to you is now no longer mainstream, I want you to understand that a lot of times the headlines don't reflect anything actually happening on the ground anywhere in the country. And I'm just going to read you to kick this off again. We spent a lot of time talking about Ted Geisel in the last segment, and he's Dr. Seuss. And I'm just going to read the headline so you have an idea of what happened around the time, that all of this hubbub started with some titles that were left off of a Reading Across America list at a school district in Virginia. So the first one is it time to cancel Dr. Seuss due to racist imagery? Why Dr. Seuss got away with anti-Asian racism for so long. 6 Dr. Seuss books won't be published for racist images. Dr. Seuss racist books, how the children's author responded. Was Dr. Seuss a racist? See the drawings and judge for yourself. Ted Geisel, Dr. Seuss, racist controversy. Point of view, why halting publication of Dr. Seuss books is the right thing to do. 6 Dr. Seuss books pulled for racist and insensitive imagery. 6, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This goes on for hundreds of different posts. Now, I want you to know, if you read these articles, they almost say nothing at all about any evidence that Dr. Seuss was racist. These are called clickbait. And it's mostly about getting people in to see the advertising. Mr. Writer, and Ken is a writer, and he has a writer's mentality in terms of asking questions and empowering what's behind the words that are on the page. But when we look at something on online, our first thought might be, it might be wise to say, what are they trying to sell me over here? And why the heck in paragraph 7 does it say, that Al Franken had permission to hug that woman? He didn't actually grope her, whatever. Can you imagine old Al, how he feels submitting to the pressure of the Me Too organization? Which isn't an organization, it was just a bunch of people coming out and saying this is unacceptable behavior. Where in the following weeks and months, 3 different governors were all accused of very similar sort of things. We have 2 of them right now that are currently serving terms. And they just basically said, pound sand, I'm going nowhere. What did Al, and I've watched interviews with Al Franken since, and he said, man, what a dumbass I was. Those words, okay? He said, I believed when people told me I had no future in politics that they were correct. And that's what happens. And Ken, you were talking about the emotional response to something right now that's very acute. Can you imagine if Al had gone to any of your training, which basically tells you to stop, breathe, assess, using your 3 BS detectors as to whether or not this really is a life-changing moment, or if some people are just yammering about you, for a period of time. So yes, ladies and gentlemen, we want you to have empowerment, and don't believe a damn thing that I say because I'm making it all up, okay? Mr. Ken. Exactly. Where do you go when there's nothing that makes any sense, right?
Actually, it all makes sense.
Yeah.
It's funny. It all makes sense. I mean, it's always come back to, it's so interesting how, you know, two things that strike me. One is Michael Singer saying the universe is perfect. So if we're not seeing it as that way, that's just our natural ignorance of being human and not being able to be omniscient. And the other thing is every system is designed to deliver exactly the results that it's currently delivering. So there's just, of course you have your reactions to something breaking, and it's not a bad idea to get a historical trend line of what led to that. But then at some point you have to start thinking about, what would you rather have the system designed to do? And I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we face right now, is we have a very diverse population in the United States as far as what we feel we want the system to be able to do. There's not a lot of agreement symptomatically. I bet you that the majority of people would agree that everyone getting a equal opportunity, and then succeeding on a meritocracy, and then caring for people who are just less capable. I'm sure there are things at the core that we could agree on, but we have very different opinions on how we get there. So, and it seems like it's funny, as you were listing those headlines, there are other headlines like, Dr. Seuss being censored, Biden leaving out. It's just, who's saying it? And I think that's what we forget, is when someone has an alarmist reaction, who are they? I always notice, it's always interesting because I look at the spectrum. I like to look at how CNN's reporting in their perspective, how Fox reports, how NPR reports, and see how they'll cover, or even what they're paying attention to. It's very different, right? But one of the things I always find interesting is when a politician says, this is the outrage, here's the link to donate to my campaign so I can fight it. So who's saying it? Someone who knows, who finds that thing important, how to market it in a way, promote it in a way that's going to engage them and get them to pay the money, so that they can then get an office, so that they can continue to influence the system in the way they want it influenced on behalf of their constituents. So
and I want to add to that. I think that so I actually, my background is in media, and I'll tell you, even for the local news, because it was always advertised and driven, right? You wanted to have more numbers, more people tune in. And so what do? They come up with the headlines to get people to tune in. Yeah. It doesn't matter if the story had any beef at all. It was all about the headline. So that's how it works in media. Now, it's funny because I always hear people talk about CNN and how they are just such liars. And then you hear about Fox. They are such, I'll tell you what, they all do it. They all do the clickbait thing. And if you really want to find out the truth about a story, this is the key to me, is not to be tied to what you want it to be. In other words, don't be tied to being like, if I'm going to look at this, I can't be like, I want it to be this, so I'm going to prove it that way. That's not how you should do it. That's not how scientists do it. They pull away. They have to eliminate things one at a time. And I think that looking at it that way makes challenging yourself, which is really hard. Read books that you don't believe in. That is a really hard thing to do. But that's the only place you're going to learn things, because you don't know what you don't know.
So what you're saying is, both of you, really spot on. Okay. And where I went to college, I took a course that in political science, that one whole month was dedicated to looking at different historical things that had happened, and then having open debate, both for and against. So we would read through, let's say the Lincoln Douglas debates, and then we would take turns, arguing Douglas's position and then arguing Lincoln's position. We did the same thing with Adolf Hitler. and Neville Chamberlain. We did the same thing, with all these different people. And I have to tell you, I'm so blessed to have been able to be able to set my own opinion aside with the idea of really understanding what somebody else is saying when it's their opinion and where they got the information from, and not with the goal of changing their mind. Okay, completely coming from a different place. I don't care what your opinion is, and you're welcome to keep it, from now on, if I never see you again. But I'd like to better understand it, maybe to update my opinion and learn from you. And that requires trust in a conversation, which the marketing side of media has no room for. They get paid to produce results. The number of clicks actually turns into dollars and cents. And what you said earlier just reminded me of, Roger Waters' album "Amused to Death." I don't know if you're familiar with Roger Waters. He made this album. I can't tell you what year it was, but it seems like it probably was in, I don't know, 1992. It's saying, but there's a 2-song track there that's called "It Makes Perfect Sense." Okay. And in the first part, they're talking, his lyrics are about who's being taken advantage of, who's doing, heinous things to human beings. And then in the second, as you said, Ken, the system is in place and it all makes perfect sense. And I'll just read this to you. Expressed in dollars and cents, pounds, shillings, and pence. Can't you see that it all makes perfect sense? So the money drives the conversation without regard for whether it makes the world a better place. And the more people make money with controversy, and they don't care if there's truth in the story or anything else, as long as they're making more money. So now, here's the neat part. Where do we go to kind of like check in on this? And as you would say, Ken, get other verification as to what really is true?
I think that there's attention, the money follows attention. So the media is only doing more of what people are asking for, because that's, and that's just business. If no one pays attention, no money gets put into it. Yes. Period. I mean, and that's, it dies on the vine. So, so what headline is someone going to, the headline says a well thought out discourse on this issue from multiple perspectives, or are they going to click on the headline says the radical fill in the blank is ruining America by doing fill in the blank? What are they going to click on? So the company, unless it's like an NPR where they basically have to beg for donations to stay in business, or, you're going to get a billion people all clicking on that crazy headline for, about Dr. Seuss. What are they going to do? We're all deciding what we're getting, exactly what we're asking for. And, I mean, like I'm a big anti-soda person. I think soda is just poison. So, but it'll never go away unless people stop buying it. And if everyone just stops buying it, guess what would happen to soda? It would be replaced with something else that people would buy instead. So, so I don't know the answer to that, but I think it's important to remember that we can complain about it, but we also created it collectively.
So Ken, one of the other things that's always out there is the 7 reasons, blah, blah, blah. The things that Congress doesn't want you to know, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. And I want you to know you could make yourself a multi-millionaire by publishing a blog that starts off with, "You are poisoning your children and you don't know it. Why do you give them soda?"
Yeah.
I guarantee. And here's what the neat thing is. Remember back in the day, Melissa, I don't know if you're old enough to be able to identify with this. It was important that underneath everything, there actually was a true story somewhere, Right. And now what you're seeing is, as Ken says, we're getting what we're paying for. Well, that can be a minuscule slice of 10 to 50,000 subscribers out of 300 million that live in the United States. Probably 285 million of them are active on some kind of social media every single day. They don't need to get them all. They only need one little slice that already agrees with them, whatever they say.
Right.
And let me give you just a quick example to just show how difficult this is. So we opened Quester's Way, and part of that was a cafe whose core value was teaching people about healthy eating. And so we did not sell soda in there, and we lost a ton of money. It was almost impossible to run a profitable restaurant, because when you buy soda, it's a large cup of soda, based on the concentrate, costs like 5 cents, and then you mark it up to $1. So instead, we're giving away salad dressing that we're making on site from scratch to make sure that we know every ingredient that's in there. And honestly, we had a lot of people that came in and stormed out because we didn't sell soda. They're like, yeah, how do you not sell soda? They wanted greasy French fries or whatever. And we're like, no, we do rice battered chicken tenders in a convection oven, so there's no oil. But it wasn't what they were used to. And, so here we're trying to do the right thing and create an environment. And it was embraced by a lot of people. Absolutely. And just from a system standpoint, that restaurant was never going to be profitable because we didn't want to make the easy decisions that people would pay us for that would allow us to be profitable. People would have bought the soda and we would have made money. So we had to make a very hard choice between either raising prices and getting people to pay more for something that they could get cheaper at McDonald's, even though the quality was, considerably less, or undercut those values and do what would keep the business alive. Very difficult, So I think that can't be overlooked in all of these conversations,
I think that the hottest news items today are those of commentary. And commentary is not necessarily news. It's just their twist on it. And that is where you see everybody watching. Everybody watches those shows. I don't care what side of the fence you're on. And that is a big part of the problem, because, again, like Bill had said, you're just looking for that little sliver that suits your what perspective. You can find it somewhere, and I find that upsetting, but I don't know what to do to change it. I don't know what your thoughts are.
So as Ken is apt to say, when you change the conversation, and we know this, okay, it's an economic law of certainty. Galbraith, I don't care who you look to, they all say the pendulum always moves out to its extreme, and then comes back to the center and goes to the other extreme. So we have this, this liberal, and then a reactionary period, then another liberal period, then a reactionary period. I'm not talking about politics now. I'm just talking about the people that are looking for, less control, and then people that are looking for more control. And the reactionary is always against people getting out of control, right? Mm-hmm. So in precise language, when people stop clicking, they stop that story. Have you noticed that? What is remarkably hot for 3 or 4 days, and then a news story comes out and says, gee whiz, that isn't what happened at all. We've got people, in the FBI who just came out and said, blah, 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 blah. And not only that, we have, emails, and we have all this other stuff. And then the mainstream media picks it up. Funny enough, that seems to have, a very strong effect on whether there's more clickbait on their networks or others.
Can I share a quick story that I heard from, it was a podcast on NPR, and they were talking about the story where if you guys recall, the young man who I think he had a Make America Great Again hat, and he was, in this crowd with the other students, and there was a Indian man who was there, and they were saying that he was making fun of him in some way, or there was some issue around that whole scenario. Do you guys recall this?
Absolutely.
I don't.
Absolutely. There have been over $1 billion worth of lawsuits having to do with how
Right.
that story got published and was wrong.
Right. So this is the funny thing about that story. So this is what I want to share. So that happened, right? And when it went on the news, they just showed a snippet of it. And if you just saw that snippet, you would be outraged about the whole scenario, about the way this young man acted. And this mother saw, like, somebody called her, and she saw it on and her friend called her, and she said, "Oh my God." So she tuned it in, she saw it, and she was completely upset. She was so outraged by the whole thing. And so she wrote a letter to, or whatever, opinion piece to the newspaper about the whole thing. And later on, it had to be retracted because it was found out that that wasn't exactly what happened, right? The interesting thing about that was then what happened was Rush Limbaugh picked it up, and he did this whole story about how outrageous that somebody, like a journalist who was going to write to this paper, wouldn't check the story first, and how upset he was. And he was completely outraged. Of course, then it came to find out that this was just a mom. She was not a journalist, right? She was just saying, this is what I saw, and this is how I reacted. So everybody's doing this, like, everybody's outraged about each other and all upset, all because the news created some clickbait. And you know what? They just do it back and forth, and it's not serving anyone. I mean, this mom felt bad that she was wrong. She didn't intend that, but you can't fault people for just seeing what they see, and they just don't know. And so it's a difficult thing to maneuver through. And that's why I think that people shouldn't be so angry with each other. I mean, we got to look at what they're seeing. So,
well, here's the other thing that we're talking about. Remember, I was talking earlier about the second punch. Okay. What actually happened was that Nick Sandman is his name, and you can go back and look this up. It happened, I think the event actually was in January of 2019, and a tribal elder named Nathan Phillips was beating, a drum, and all the students were there, and then the tribal elder came over and started beating the drum in his face, expecting for Nick to move out of the way. I don't know what he was expecting, but there's this close-up of Nick standing there with this kind of, nervous sneer on his face, looking very guilty, like he was challenging the person with the drum. And long story short, later, I mean, that went viral, about 20 seconds of them looking at each other toe to toe. All he did was stand his ground, standing on a staircase, okay? There was no place for him to retreat to. So CNN picked it up. A half a dozen other major news organizations picked it up. He has settled with CNN on what was a $275 million slander/libel suit for what they did. I don't know if it's changed the behavior very much, but there are others that are still in process. And I'll be interested, because I think I don't know how old he is right now, but it seems like he might have been either 18 or 17 years old when it occurred.
yeah.
If he hasn't written a book, I think he's going to have a good one. I'm going to buy a copy of it and hear what his thoughts are.
Well, irrelevant of what happened to him, because this is horrible. This happens to so many people in the public eye, right? They can either be demonized and ripped out of their jobs or whatever. And it is all kind of driven by I think two things. Number one, the clickbait media, but number two, also by us collectively, as Ken eloquently put, right? We collectively are the ones who are clicking on it. And it's kind of like seeing an accident, and you know, you got to turn and look, and it's really hard not to. So what do we do collectively as a country to stop this and put this behind us, where we can actually have conversations again? That's what I want to know. That's what I'm interested in. I'm interested in bridging that gap and creating, you know, an environment that's just more positive.
Well, see, what you're saying is very powerful. In the vast majority of incidents where something goes viral, it goes viral on Twitter. Okay. And then there are people that are paid to make whatever they see on Twitter mean something. Okay. Here's what happened, you know, bum, 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 bum. And Twitter, up until last year, did very little to police any posts whatsoever, other than conservative actors, you know, congressmen and senators and that sort of thing. They did nothing if there was an erroneous post that was there having to do with anything that seemed like it fit the narrative. So they're also named in this suit because they've taken action on other posts, you know, for other reasons, but they didn't do anything with this one at all. And I might be wrong on this, but I think up until a few months ago, you could still go online and see all of the tweets that were out the day afterwards, and that, you know, when it went viral. So all of that said, it's the same thing that we saw with Dr. Seuss. What happened was something happened. Somebody else started publishing on Twitter these tweets saying what it means. And we've seen the same thing happen with celebrities. Somebody somewhere said something that was very innocuous, and the next thing you know, the cancel culture is you know, at their throat. What I love, go ahead.
I was just wondering, like, who gets to police this, you know, or do we need police? So do we go forward in a world where, hey, whatever you say holds, or do social media giants police what people say or not say, or is it the government that polices what people don't say or say? But how do we? So the challenges here is, like, you almost don't want to have anyone have that kind of control, and yet at the same time, us collectively are clicking on this clickbait. So how do we change that? I guess I don't have an answer. I'm just asking.
Well, how indeed. And we only have to look back to about 20 years ago, actually 25 years ago, when Congress, in their infinite wisdom, chose to make internet corporations immune from liability, you know, for lawsuits, for, you know, for defamation, wrongful. They did the same thing for them that they did for elected officials, which basically means with impunity, somebody who's a congressman can stare at the camera night after night after night and tell bald-faced lies. So the question now is, the people that make the regulations governing what makes a Twitter or Instagram or one of these social media sites immune to taxation and immune to any type of censorship, do they have the intestinal fortitude to basically say to these trillion-dollar corporations, y'all can't do that anymore, and guess what? We're now going to collect taxes from you on an annual basis, because what you do is you publish stories, and you are, you know, in charge of the editorial content of the stories on your platform. They were protected as long as they, you know, did not interfere with stories, and that's what they did probably up until about 4 years ago. Lots changed since then. They're basically playing chicken, you know, with the Congress in terms of, are you really going to try to do something to stop us? And they just come in and they say, you know, all three big heads, Google, Twitter, and Facebook, you know, we're doing we recognize that there are probably some judgment errors that have been exercised here, and we're more or less, you know, trying to be self-policing in this instance, which is more or less telling the Congress, you know, up your nose with a rubber hose. We don't care what you do. We have more money than you do in a lawsuit.
So, I mean, like if somebody publishes something that's, and this is the question too, because sometimes people publishing and they think they're correct. They're not necessarily publishing something they think that they're not correct about. So again, even if so say you post something on Facebook, say a congressman or woman posts something on Facebook and it is found later on to be erroneous. Okay, maybe we know it's an error or not true. Maybe we don't know. I mean, this is almost impossible for a Facebook or Twitter to really be perfect at. I mean, I don't even know how you do that. I mean, it's like almost impossible. So do we, when somebody does something like that, I know like for a while they were posting like, you know, counter ones around it. I mean, how do you sue them because they, and then how can you really make them liable if they didn't know, you know, that they didn't know what they didn't know, you know, if it wasn't purposeful. Some things are purposeful, some things are not, you know.
They're making the argument that these guys who are billionaires sitting in front of Congress are making, you know, we're using our best judgment right now, and we're open, you know, to getting some advice from people who really care and really want to see us do a better job, because it's our commitment at the end of the day to do a really good job in allowing people to express themselves, you know, in the town square. So this is why you've seen a lot of people talk about antitrust legislation coming in the area of these giants. I'm not aware of any bills that have got enough support to actually even be brought to the House floor, you know?
Do you think things should be broken down?
I don't know what the solution is going to be, but I want you to know that what the megaliths know, they're not monoliths. They're so much bigger than all of that. They're bigger than 95% of the countries in the world. You know, there's probably only a dozen, 15 countries out of 300 and some that have a greater national gross product than they do. So the point is this: they know all we have to do is stall. Elected officials come and go every 2 to 4 years. You know, new presidents come and go every 2 to 4 years. They now know they don't have to agree to do anything. There's nobody there with the staying power to ride herd on them and actually enforce that they do anything at all, in my humble opinion. Okay.
I know. It's like, I wonder if they outlawed social media, like what that would be like.
Well, I know a lot of people's lives would cease to exist in anything that's recognizable to them. However, Ken, I'm real interested in the perspective, you know, that you bring in terms of however it is operating. Where's the lever that we get, as Melissa mentioned, to start to make a difference with that as a culture in the future?
I mean, it's just a tool, you know, I mean, they're all just tools and we're the ones using them. And again, they're responding to the way we're choosing to use them.
Sure.
And, you know, so if there's, I don't know, it's that whole, I love the drop a pebble, make some ripples thing, you know, it's just, you know, you have something of value and when you let it go, there's a point of impact and then ripple spread. Right. So what's the thing that you're letting go? And if, you know, you're letting go and the point of impact in your circle is outrage or anger, then those ripples spread. If it's positivity and kindness, then those ripples spread. So we each have that ability to just hold ourselves personally accountable, you know, and I think that's difficult when you're in a heightened state of crisis, you know, because when you believe that you're drowning, you'll take people down with you because you just can't think through to that level. It's, you know, it's that whole thing. The other thing, my little blog there about, you know, spilling over. The idea is, what do you fill yourself up first? And if you fill yourself up with love and kindness, then that will spill over to others. If you fill yourself up with fear and anxiety, that's what's going to spill over, you know? So, you know, and I think that, you know, in the end, to me, it's always felt like just recognizing, you know, self-care, and, tending to our own needs in service to something greater than ourselves. And it's so easy to make a difference. So I'm going to give you a really quick story. Years ago, like as a business owner, whenever I walk into any store and someone services me, I think, would I hire that person? And I was in a conversation with someone at one point saying there's so many people that they're doing a really good job. Like I would hire them and they probably don't know that they're doing a good job, so, and I could say it to them and, and that made a difference. Like, and I'd say, what, you're working really well. You're doing a great job. Thank you. And, oh. So we decided to take it a step further, and we had, wasn't that expensive, we created stickers that said, thank you for being awesome at what you do. And whenever I'd go into a store and someone would do an awesome job, I'd give them a sticker. They put it on and they're all proud, and now everybody's coming in and seeing that, and it's reflecting back outward like a thank you towards them. And it was just such a simple thing. Everyone listening right now, you could go online and for $20 get a roll of stickers that say thank you for being awesome at what you do, and you could just hand them to people who demonstrate they're being awesome at what you do. Imagine the ripples that spread. And we did it for a little while, and we were giving them away to our students and then it just kind of died out. I'm not sure why. We just lost our attention, our focus on it. But we all have the ability to go on Facebook and post something positive. Go look at my Facebook profile. There's no link shared. There's nothing bad said. I just try to and I also try not to judge or say things that influence people in a direction. It's more being really thoughtful about wording things in a way where it lets people just consider what it means to them without pushing them in a direction. And that's really, really hard to do. And it's taken 30 years of study to even sort of be able to do it. So how can you expect that from people who are just trying to pay their damn bills and get through the day and, keep their kids from, losing their minds through all of this craziness of the pandemic, so I don't know.
But that's really, I love that though. I have to say that, if more of us, and if people listening, if more of you just focus on something positive, and the other part of it is not comment. If you don't like what somebody says, you don't have to comment.
Yeah.
I mean, I just don't. So if somebody says something positive, I'm like, yay. That's what I'm trying to support. But I wish more people did it. So
I'll give you one more simple one from my mentor. It's called Smiling Eyes. And he says, just throughout your day, smile with your eyes 10% more than the person that you look at. That's it. You don't have to say anything, just add and don't overdo it, but just wherever they're at, meet them there and then reflect back a little more. You're just gifting them with that tiny bit of energy. And I'll tell you, I've been doing that wearing the mask for the last year, and it's incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
I mean, watch people's whole energy change. Just, you're checking out a big Y and just give that little smile with your eyes, and you see them just kind of relax a little bit, because they were seen and given a little bit. And what does it cost me? That's the candles lighting candles, right? You don't put one candle out to light another one. You just lend a little light. And it's not that it's simple, but it's not easy, because we have so much of our own stuff that we're dealing with. It's a remember and forget thing. So maybe if we can just remember a little bit more than we forget, then that'll start to tip things. And then things like Facebook, instead of telling them what not to do, we'll decide what we're going to do with it. And now the tool, they don't care how they make money. They really don't. So if they're making money by spreading kindness and love throughout the platform, I think they'd be thrilled, to do it that way. So that's on us, I guess.
So just a short rejoinder. One of the neat things when we went through with that weekend training with John, which now seems like it's about 3 years ago-ish, and our homework was to go home, and what he said was, have your eyes smile at your spouse, your significant other, and hold that for 12 seconds, just to the point where they say something, okay? And then we got back together again, and all of us were like, my wife said something like, what are you doing? And Williams came in and he wasn't married at the time. He said he did it with a family member, and they said, "Stop that." And so you just keep smiling with your eyes. And the remarkable thing in everything that we're saying here, I could equally advocate in an argument for everything that I stated as a positive, everything that made me sound like I was so in, from the Nick Sandman, to any of it. And the main reason for that is if you have watched something and you have an opinion one way or the other, you've earned it by giving your trust to a source for that information. This is not about whether or not you're correct. This is about whether or not it serves your lifestyle and your children's lifestyle and your family and your company to step back every once in a while and question. Have great questions about your environment and what your news is saying to you. And again, I said in my post about the anti-racist, I said it's so much easier to gain people's support when you're anti-something as opposed to rolling your sleeves up and getting out into the community and teaching people to love each other. That's an impossible task, like bending the spoon, in the Matrix. So we all need to become, love teachers and spoon benders in our own lifestyle. And I don't have anything else for today. Anybody have any closing thoughts?
Drop some pebbles and make some ripples.
Love it.
Melissa?
I'm with you. 100%. Yes. Stay positive. Yeah.
We've been partners in that for, it seems like, about 5 or 6 years. And that's what we're doing here is we're casting pebbles and we're lighting candles and not cursing the darkness. We're lighting candles and all those other things that would be other possibilities for lighting candles. So thank you all for tuning in again, and we can't wait to get you another show next week or before. In the meantime, we're lighting the candle, the world that works, and come back and see us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you listen to stuff that's worth listening. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Lighting the Candle, A World That Works, part of the Exvadio Podcast Network. You can hear us at exvadio.com/podcasts, Apple Podcasts app, Google Play, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, and wherever you find podcasts.